Do you know what justice sounds like? It isn't the echo of a gavel, and it isn't the applause of a crowd. Sometimes, justice hides inside the laughter of guilty men, waiting for the right moment to strike. The night belonged to them. 5 officers gathered in a lonely farmhouse on the edge of town, pretending the world was theirs. The room was thick with smoke and cheap liquor, their laughter filling the silence of the woods outside. They weren't afraid of being overheard. They had power, and men with power don't whisper. Among them sat Evelyn Price. Young, sharp-eyed, her uniform still crisp enough to smell of starch. To the others, she was the rookie, the quiet one, the only woman at the table. To Evelyn, they were something else entirely. Names carved into a wound she carried every day. There was Reed, loud and brash, who couldn't speak without shouting. He loved reminding everyone he was the strongest voice in the room. Then Harlan, older, broad-shouldered. His smile as thin as the cards he shuffled without care. Collins and Vince, younger but already tainted by arrogance, laughing at jokes they didn't find funny, eager to belong. They all thought Evelyn wanted the same thing: to be accepted, to be part of their circle. They didn't know she had been circling them long before this night began. Because 2 years earlier, Evelyn had buried her brother. His name was Daniel Price, and he was only 17 when 4 officers stopped him on a quiet roadside. Daniel was gentle, soft-spoken. A boy who strummed his guitar more than he spoke of violence, who worked after school stacking shelves to save for college. He had no drugs, no weapons, no reason to die. But he died anyway. The report claimed he resisted, that he fought, that they had no choice but to subdue him. Evelyn had read it until the words blurred. Then she read the autopsy. Broken ribs, fractured jaw, taser burns across his chest. Evidence of a beating no report acknowledged. For signatures at the bottom: Reed, Harlan, Collins, Vince. The case was closed before Evelyn's mother had even chosen a casket. Internal Affairs dismissed her protests. No charges, no trial, not even a second look. Daniel's name was buried under paperwork, just another boy who didn't matter enough. But he mattered to her. That night, as she sat at the table with her brother's killers, Evelyn smiled when she was expected to smile. She even laughed at their crude jokes, at their stories of power and control. Her face betrayed nothing, though inside her stomach knotted with rage so sharp it felt like glass. Reed leaned close, his breath thick with alcohol. "Quiet one, aren't you, Price? Don't worry, you'll loosen up. We all do." She tilted her head, feigning interest. "Maybe I'm just listening, learning." Harlan smirked, sliding the cards across the table. "That's smart. Learn from the right people, and you'll last in this job." Their arrogance was a shield. They couldn't imagine she was more than a rookie eager to please. But Evelyn had joined the force with one purpose only: to get close enough to look her brother's killers in the eyes. That as the hours stretched, their laughter grew heavier, meaner. The music from the corner radio grew louder. Collins leaned across the table, slurring his words. "You think this job's about protecting people? Hell no. It's about power. Who's got it, who doesn't. Simple as that." Evelyn's voice was steady. "And who has it here?" Reed slammed his hand down, nearly toppling the table. "We do. Always have. Always will." His laughter cut through the haze, bold and ugly. The words struck her, but not in the way he thought. She memorized every syllable, every careless confession, another nail in their coffin. When she excused herself, she walked into the bathroom and shut the door. She stared at herself in the cracked mirror above the sink. The face staring back wasn't just a rookie officer. It was Daniel's sister. It was a girl who had stood over her brother's coffin, promising she would never forget. Her hand brushed the pistol hidden beneath her jacket. Loaded. Always loaded. She closed her eyes, whispering to the boy who could no longer answer. "Not yet. Wait, Dawn." Because rage was easy. Rage could burn everything too quickly. This had to be deliberate, precise, final. Back at the table, the men slouched deeper into drunken stupor. Cards scattered, bottles emptied. By 3 a.m., they were half asleep, their bravado drowned in alcohol. Reed snored. Collins muttered nonsense. Vince had passed out on the couch. Harlan, still awake, leaned back in his chair with eyes half closed, convinced the night belonged to him. Evelyn sat apart, silent, her drink untouched. Her pulse was calm. Her mind sharp. Daniel's face lived in her memory, not fading, not forgiving. Every bruise on his body was burned into her vision. Every laugh at this table was fuel. The farmhouse around them was just wood and nails, but to Evelyn, it was already a tomb. She was only waiting for dawn to seal it. People talk about monsters like they hide under the bed, waiting to drag you down. But the real monsters don't hide. They laugh, they drink, and they wear uniforms that make them untouchable. The farmhouse grew darker as the night stretched on, the air thick with smoke and arrogance. The men had started the evening with jokes and stories, but now their words twisted into something uglier, something that revealed who they really were when no one else was listening. Reed leaned back in his chair, his laughter echoing against the wooden walls. He had been drinking the longest, and with every swallow, his voice grew sharper, meaner. "You know what I love most about this job?" he said, pointing his beer bottle like it was a weapon. "Watching their faces when they realize they've got no power. That look, like a trapped animal. That's the best part." Collins laughed too hard, slamming his hand on the table, desperate for approval. "Yeah, man, like that kid last month. The one crying for his mom. Thought he could talk back, thought we'd let him walk away." His words slurred together, but his meaning was clear enough. Vince joined in, eager not to be left behind. "People think we're here to protect them. Idiots. We're here to remind them who's in charge. Always." Harlan didn't laugh. He just sat there with his heavy eyes and thin smile, the kind of silence that carried more weight than noise. He was older, seasoned. He didn't need to brag. His authority was carved into the room. Even Reed, as loud as he was, always looked for Harlan's reaction. Evelyn sat among them, her hands folded neatly on the table, her face calm. On the surface, she looked like she was absorbing their words, learning, as they liked to think she was. But beneath the calm, her mind burned. Every word they spoke was another piece of the puzzle, another reminder of why she was here. 2 years ago, she had begged for an investigation. She had sat in cold waiting rooms, facing officials who looked at her with empty eyes. "The officers did their job," they told her. "Your brother resisted." And now those same men sat drunk before her, boasting about the very power they had used to end Daniel's life. She thought of her mother, sitting alone in the quiet house that used to echo with Daniel's music. Her mother had aged in those 2 years, each wrinkle carved by grief, each silence heavier than the last. Evelyn had promised her she would move on, that joining the force was about building a future. But that had been a lie. Evelyn hadn't joined to serve. She had joined to destroy, and tonight was the night she had been waiting for. The tension in the room grew as Reed's jokes shifted. He leaned toward Evelyn, his eyes narrowing with drunken boldness. "You sit too quiet, Price. Makes a man wonder what you're hiding." Collins smirked, leaning closer as well. "She's probably scared. First night with the real boys." "Huh? Don't worry, rookie. You'll learn how we do things." Vince added, "If you last long enough." Their words weren't playful anymore. They circled her, not with fists or guns, but with the entitlement of men who believed they owned the room, the badge, the world. Evelyn forced a smile, tilting her head just enough to seem naive. "Maybe I'm just watching. You learn a lot by staying quiet." Reed slapped the table, amused. "Smart girl. Watch and learn. That's the only way you'll survive out here. Stick with us, you'll be untouchable." She nodded, though her thoughts were far from agreement. Untouchable. That was the word they clung to. They thought the badge was a shield, that it protected them from consequence. And for 2 years it had. But shields can be broken. By 3 in the morning, their bravado had dulled. Reed's voice cracked from shouting, his head heavy against the back of his chair. Collins had spilled half his drink on the floor, mumbling stories no one understood. Vince had dozed off completely, his body twisted on the couch. Only Harlan remained composed, though his eyes drooped, his cigarette burning down to ash between his fingers. Evelyn hadn't touched her drink. Her mind was sharp, her heart steady. She had trained herself for this moment. Every laugh, every insult, every predatory glance. She had swallowed them whole, because rage wasn't the weapon she needed tonight. Patience was. She sat there, still and silent, as the farmhouse quieted around her in her mind. She went back to Daniel. She remembered standing in the rain at his grave. Her hands clenched so tightly around the flowers she'd brought that the stems snapped. She remembered how the townspeople whispered, some pitying, some dismissive. "It's a tragedy," they said. But maybe he shouldn't have resisted. That lie had become her reality, repeated so many times it almost drowned the truth. Almost. Because Evelyn had seen her brother's body. She had traced the bruises with trembling fingers, her tears falling onto his cold skin. She knew what had been done to him. And now, sitting in that farmhouse, she was looking into the eyes of the men who had done it. Harlan's voice broke her thoughts. "You're a strange one, Price." She looked up, meeting his gaze. His eyes were steady, sharper than the others. He studied her, his silence weighing heavy. "Most rookies try too hard. They want to prove themselves. But you—" He paused, flicking his cigarette into an empty bottle. "You're different. Can't decide if that's good or bad." Evelyn forced a small smile. "Maybe I'm just careful." Harlan nodded slowly, as if that answer satisfied him, though his eyes lingered on her longer than she liked. He was the dangerous one, she realized. Not because he was loud, not because he bragged, but because he was always watching. But even he wouldn't see what was coming as the clock ticked closer to dawn. The farmhouse sank into a drunken silence. Reed snored. Collins mumbled incoherently. Vince didn't stir. Harlan lit another cigarette, his eyes heavy but awake, and Evelyn sat in the shadows, waiting. She had carried her brother's death for 2 years. She had played the role of rookie, endured the humiliation, the taunts, the endless reminders that she was nothing but an outsider. She had smiled when she wanted to scream, laughed when she wanted to cry. And now, at last, the moment was almost here. There comes a moment when silence is no longer survival. It becomes surrender. And I had been silent long enough. The farmhouse was quiet. Not peaceful, never that, but heavy with the weight of alcohol and exhaustion. Reed's snores rattled through the dark. Collins murmured half-dreams. Vince lay sprawled across the couch like a discarded doll. Only Harlan remained half awake, the ember of his cigarette glowing like a watchful eye in the shadows. Evelyn sat in her chair, her hands steady on her knees. The night had stretched long, each hour pulling her further into the edge of decision. For 2 years she had been building to this moment. Now it was here. The reckoning wasn't loud. It didn't begin with a gunshot or a scream. It began with breath. The slow inhale Evelyn drew to steady herself. The quiet exhale that carried away her fear. She rose, her movements deliberate, careful not to stir the drunks who surrounded her. Reed's head lolled against his chest. Collins twitched, muttering something about teaching respect. Vince's mouth hung open, a thin line of drool glistening in the pale moonlight seeping through the window. Evelyn's eyes shifted to Harlan. He was watching her. Not sharply, not suspiciously, just watching like a man who never truly slept. His cigarette burned low between his fingers, the smoke curling into the stagnant air. "You're restless," he murmured, his voice low enough not to wake the others. Evelyn's pulse quickened. The older wolf had seen her stir. She forced a shrug. "Couldn't sleep." Harlan studied her through the haze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Sleep doesn't come easy in this line of work. Too many things we carry. Too many ghosts." His words cut sharper than he knew. Evelyn swallowed hard, her mask unshaken. "I'll walk it off. Clear my head." He nodded slowly, flicking the ash into a beer can. "Don't stray too far. The night's darker than it looks." She managed a thin smile and moved toward the door. The wooden boards creaked softly under her boots, but the others remained lost in drunken oblivion. Only Harlan's gaze followed her, lingering until the door shut behind her. Outside, the cold air bit at her skin, a sharp contrast to the smoky warmth of the farmhouse. The fields stretched endless beneath the moonlight, the corn swaying like whispers of ghosts. Evelyn closed her eyes, inhaling the night. Daniel's face rose in her mind. His laugh, his stubbornness, the way he had fought for fairness even when the world refused it. She remembered the day they buried him, how the earth had swallowed him whole, leaving her with nothing but rage. This was for him. Her hand slid to the small pack she had hidden beneath the floorboards of her truck, parked behind the barn. She had stashed it there weeks ago, knowing this night would come. Inside were the tools she needed. Not the tools of an officer, but of a sister seeking justice. A knife, its handle worn smooth by her grip. A pistol, clean, oiled, and loaded. And a single photograph. Daniel, smiling in the sun, his arms slung around her shoulders. She pressed her thumb to the picture, grounding herself. This is not revenge, she reminded herself. This is balance. When she returned, the farmhouse was still, the same tableau of sleeping predators. But Harlan was awake. He hadn't moved from his chair, though the cigarette had burned down to the filter. His eyes lifted to her as she entered. "You took your time," he said softly. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. "Needed it." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Harlan gave a single nod, as though he understood something she hadn't said. He leaned back, closing his eyes, the tension in his frame easing at last. Within minutes, even he drifted into shallow sleep. It was time. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, the weight of the pistol cold in her hand. Her breath was calm, her mind sharpened into a single unwavering line. The men who had taken Daniel's life slept less than 10 feet from her. Drunk, vulnerable, human. But monsters all the same. Her first step was toward Reed. The loudest, the cruelest. She remembered the way he had laughed earlier, bragging about the look of fear in a young boy's eyes. She remembered his voice in the reports she had read, dismissing Daniel as non-compliant. Now his mouth hung open, his snores rattling. Evelyn raised the pistol, her hand steady. But she didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she pressed the barrel gently against his temple, watching how even in sleep he flinched at the cold steel. For the first time, Reed knew fear. Evelyn whispered, barely audible, "Do you hear him, Reed? Do you hear Daniel screaming?" Reed stirred, mumbling, but didn't wake. Evelyn pulled back, lowering the weapon. She wasn't here for quick executions. That would be too merciful. She wanted them to feel it, to face what they had done, to know, before the end, that their power was gone. She moved to Collins next. His face was slack, his breath sour with whiskey. She remembered how he had mocked Daniel's last moments, repeating them tonight like a sick joke. Her hand twitched around the knife. The blade could silence him in seconds. But again she stopped. Killing was easy. Making them face truth, that was harder. Her eyes shifted to Vince, the youngest of them. He had followed the others' lead, too weak to stand alone, too eager to belong. But weakness wasn't innocence. His hands were just as bloody. Finally, her gaze returned to Harlan. He was the center of it all. The silent one, the watcher, the man whose authority had allowed the others to act without fear. He hadn't laughed as loud, hadn't bragged as cruelly, but his silence had been permission. And Daniel was dead because of it. If Reed was the blade, if Collins was the voice, if Vince was the shadow, Harlan was the spine. Break the spine, and the body falls apart. Evelyn tightened her grip on the pistol. The plan shifted in her mind, crystallizing. She wouldn't kill them in their sleep. No, she would wake them. She would strip away their illusions. She would let them see the fear they had given so freely. And only then would she decide who lived and who died. She stepped back, her voice cutting through the silence. "Wake up!" It wasn't a shout. It was calm, commanding. Reed stirred first, groaning as he lifted his head. Collins blinked, confused. Vince rubbed his eyes. And Harlan opened his eyes slowly, deliberately, like a man who already knew. Evelyn raised the pistol, her stance unshakable. "On your feet." Confusion spread across their faces. replaced quickly by indignation. Reed squinted, his words slurred. "What the hell are you doing, Price?" Collins tried to laugh, though it came out nervous. "Rookie's lost her mind." But Harlan didn't speak. His gaze locked on hers. Reading the truth in her steady eyes, Evelyn's voice was low, unwavering. "2 years ago, you killed Daniel Price, my brother. Tonight, you answer for it." Silence fell. Reed's face twisted in disbelief, then anger. "That's bullshit." He resisted. "Don't." Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip. The pistol didn't move. "Don't you dare speak his name with a lie." Collins swallowed hard, glancing at the others. Vince shifted, panic flickering in his eyes. And Harlan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, studying her like a chess master staring at the final move. "So this is it," he said quietly. "You came here for us." Evelyn nodded once. "Every second of the last 2 years has led to this." The farmhouse, once their den of power, now felt like a cage. And for the first time, the wolves were trapped. For a long moment, no one moved. The weight of recognition spread across their faces, one by one. Some tried to hide their fear with smirks. Others reached for bottles as if alcohol could shield them. But no amount of pretense could erase what they saw standing before them. Reed broke first. He always did. His face twisted into something between rage and panic. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, though his voice trembled. "You shouldn't be alive," Evelyn answered. The words were not shouted. They were delivered flat, cold, like a verdict. The farmhouse, once filled with raucous noise, became a cage of silence. Only the crackle of the old fireplace and the distant sound of wind outside remained. Evelyn could feel their fear pressing against the walls, heavy and suffocating. Reed lunged. It wasn't calculated. It was desperation. His chair clattered to the floor. His boots hammered against the wooden boards, his arms stretching out in blind rage. Evelyn shifted aside, his grasp cutting only air, and in that moment, the game they had been playing ended forever. The fight erupted like lightning splitting the night. Bottles shattered, chairs overturned, fists collided with flesh, and shouts of panic filled the air. The farmhouse shook with the sound of it all. Evelyn moved through the chaos with a clarity none of them could match. She wasn't fighting as they were, wild, frantic, and scared. She was precise. Every strike was a sentence. Every step was an answer. Every pull of the trigger was a line in the story that had been waiting to be written. Reed staggered back, a snarl of fear breaking through his mask. "We didn't mean for it to happen," he shouted, as though the words could buy him mercy. "You left him in the dirt?" Evelyn said. The sound of her voice, steady and unshaken, pierced him more deeply than any weapon. And then came the thunder. A sharp, final crack that silenced Reed's voice forever. He fell not in glory, not in power, but in inevitability. The weight of his crimes, the years of arrogance, ended with the simplest truth. Justice had come. The room exploded with motion. The others scrambled, some reaching for weapons, others rushing for the door. Their drunken bravado shattered into shards of fear. Shouts turned into pleas, curses twisted into cries. The air filled with the chaos of men who had thought themselves untouchable. But Evelyn was faster. She was unrelenting. She was not chaos. She was clarity. A chair crashed against the wall. A window splintered as someone tried to escape. The sound of boots pounded against the floor. But every attempt, every desperate move, was met with her resolve. She didn't fight with the frenzy of revenge. She fought with the inevitability of judgment. One man begged, his voice cracking, hands trembling in surrender. Another cursed her name, spitting venom to mask his fear. Another swore it hadn't been his fault, that he had only followed orders. Their excuses tangled together in a cacophony of desperation. But Evelyn cut through them all with the only truth that mattered. "Daniel's gone because of you." Each word was a hammer, each strike a gavel. She wasn't killing them out of rage. She was fulfilling a debt carved in her brother's blood, unpaid for 2 long years, and now collected in full. The air shook with sharp cracks. with heavy thuds, with the sound of endings. But it wasn't gore that filled the farmhouse. It was the sheer weight of reckoning. The walls seemed to groan with it, the smoke from the fireplace curling around it, the floor carrying the echoes of a justice too long denied. And then, silence.it wasn't the silence of peace. It wasn't the silence of comfort. It was the silence of finality, of a story brought to its last page. The farmhouse, once a den of arrogance, now stood as a tomb, not just for men, but for corruption, for betrayal, for the illusion of impunity. Evelyn stood in the center of it all, chest heaving, but her hands steady. Around her lay the cost of silence, the price of forgetting. She had not come here as a killer. She had come here as a sister, as a woman betrayed, as a soul who refused to accept the lies she had been fed. And now, with the debt paid, she was something else entirely. The dawn was breaking when she stepped outside. The mist wrapped around her like a shroud, the cold air carrying away the last echoes of the night. Behind her, the farmhouse sagged under the weight of what it had witnessed. Ahead of her, the world was waking, unaware that it had changed forever. Evelyn didn't look back. She didn't need to. The debt was paid. The night was finished. But her war with the machine that had let this happen, was only beginning. She walked into the fog, not as the rookie officer they remembered, not as the grieving sister she once was. She walked as something more, something they had never prepared for. She walked as the reckoning itself. And that, my friends, brings our story to its end. If you stayed with us through every twist and every breath of Evelyn's journey, I want to thank you deeply for being here. Your time, your attention, and your emotions are what make this channel alive. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel even for a moment, I ask you to show your support. Hit the like button, share it with someone who needs a powerful tale tonight, and subscribe so you never miss the next story we create together. Every click, every comment, every share helps us grow and keep bringing you stories that matter. Thank you for walking this road with me. Until the next video, stay strong, stay inspired, and I'll see you soon.